Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Introduction to Medical Cannabis. My name is Steve Giardina, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Um, wow, it's awesome. Look at the number of people here. So thank you all for taking time out in the midweek to come out for the presentation. We are streaming this live on YouTube Live right now. So for those that may want to communicate with friends or family that are not able to join us, it's on YouTube. Golden Era will get you to the link. It'll also be recorded and saved there for future viewing. Same place, YouTube and Golden Era. Um, let's see. We have a number of people, so welcome to those of you who are joining from on this live stream. I know we have people from Canada, Mexico, and throughout the United States. Hopefully, a large number of people that are joining us. And so, welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining. A couple housekeeping things. If there were an emergency, I'm sure there won't be, but there's two exits in the back and one on the side door there. So that's our way out. Our hosts here at Nevada Theater asked me to let you know that there are restrooms downstairs and the men's room are upstairs. Please maybe silence your cell phones if you would, please. And water, you've seen there's complimentary water provided by Elevation up in the lobby. Okay, so you're probably wondering, who is this guy up here? And so I'm the patient. I am one of Dr. DeAndre's patients. I have cancer. As a matter of fact, I have pancreatic cancer. And by the looks of some of your faces, maybe you've heard of it. And more specifically, I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And so this meeting is meaningful to me because, and I'll show you some slides, a few slides about my story to introduce, why are we here? But I was diagnosed a couple of years ago, and so going through this journey, 2 years, 1 year was stage 4, and here I am. Happy to be here, by the way, and happy to see all of you. I will say it's a works in progress, no question about it, but it's terrific to be here. So I'm currently on chemotherapy, actively taking it. I had some this morning. Not something I would suggest any of you start your morning with, but for me it's terrific, and it's the way I'm making it through this journey. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. DeAndre about a year ago, referred to her by one of my oncology nurses who hears me talk about cannabis, constantly when I'm in there getting an infusion and how it's helping me with symptoms. And so he took the liberty of introducing me to Dr. DeAndre, who's an interventional medical oncologist who had an interest in all the things I was looking for, not just the standard chemotherapeutics, but in which I have a science background myself, which I would never go without, and I'm a big proponent of Western medicine and that effect. But also, how to augment this treatment, and are there ways through diet, other mind-body kinds of things, cannabinoids, and can that augment, potentiate, and have a positive impact on standard chemotherapeutic that I've been on, and I would say to you yes, and I'll show you in a few slides from now, kind of how I've evolved to be here, and then Dr. DeAndre will have an hour presentation on sort of the medical background, evidence-based science, along with sort of what we know and what we don't know about it. Dr. DeAndre was here in July of this year because of her interest and the vast amount of knowledge that I've lived here almost 40 years now. And I know there's a massive amount of what I would like to call in-country knowledge, and decades of growing, cultivating, understanding. And so Dr. DeAndre came up and met with a number of people in the industry, We were at Elevation. We had the Alliance there. And it's just an introduction of, I wanted her to be at least familiar with and introduced to the potential knowledge base here that someone in her position could tap into and potentially use in terms of helping other people, particularly oncology patients who might benefit from it. This presentation that Dr. DeAndre's making is also, she's going to make it at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester in, I believe, February. And so you're seeing the same thing that a group of physicians will be seeing. She's pedestrianized it a bit so that all of us can understand it. But the science is here. The clinical information is here for your review. And, the objective, when she called me, sent me an email a couple of months ago, she said, have this presentation. What if I came up and exposed your community to it? I said, what a rare and terrific opportunity. And so you're able to mobilize this. And I guess my objective was to continue and maybe establish a meaningful dialogue around medical cannabis and how it can help us in standard medicine. So that's what we hope to do tonight. And I don't think there's any warranties in anything that will be said tonight, but it's more about, here's some information, and hopefully that'll stimulate some thoughts for those of you in the audience that aren't familiar with it. So first order of business is I want to thank our sponsors. House of Harlequin, Wade Laughter's here. He'll be on the panel that we have at the end of the presentation. Jolly Bird is here. Chris Anderson will be also on the panel. Elevation 2477. Daniel Batchelor will be on the panel as well. Golden Era, the cocktail lounge here in Nevada City that my family owns. And 9595 is another holding company that we have a registered trademark on our zip code, in the anticipation that potentially some of this eventually would work into perhaps a county where people could come to for wellness, including cannabis. So maybe that'll come about. Hopefully this is a kernel. Maybe this will be the start of the discussion, both at the at the administrative levels, at the medical communities. And we have my 30-second editorial here on that is, in my opinion, we have all the threads of having a world-class destination for people in need. And people like myself, when you get to a certain point, you're looking for adjuncts that can help you sustain where you are, augment where you are, certainly reduce side effects from the therapies that you're going through, and then maybe with the hope that there'll be one of those magic bullets, or that will come out of this that could either stabilize diseases or even potentially provide cures for diseases in the future. But it has to start somewhere, and it seems to me like offering the ability to reduce the angst that people with cancer and other diseases face could be through the use of this integrated approach. So we have great Western medicine, we've got cannabinoids, we've got Eastern medicines here. So maybe if the right people get behind this, we could create a community that really could become world class. Thank you. I hope that can happen. Okay. Special thanks to AGA Video Systems. They're here. Again, this live streaming wouldn't be happening without them. So we had tremendous efforts this morning to get it going. So for everybody, John, Abe, Darlene, thank you very much. Aloha, Darlene. And thank you for helping to us enable this. Maria Herrera's done the bulk of the promotion here, along with Joey Jordan, so that's get the word out. Brian, DJ Fossil help us with the posters, and Nevada Theater, Tom and crew are the engines to get this thing rolling. Okay, the agenda, introductions, case study, that'll be me and coming up, Dr. DeAndre, discussion here, the people on our panel. There's been cards handed out, so if you, over the course of the presentation. If there's questions, please pass them back to somebody of the volunteers in the aisle, and we will consolidate them, and then we'll read them and get those questions answered a little bit later at that time. And please visit the booths outside. There's a lot of subject matter expertise in that lobby right now. If you have questions, please, don't be shy. Get those questions out to those folks because they're really not. Okay, so here's my story. The background. Diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in May of 2017. I had Whipple surgery in June of same year at UCSF. Fortunately, it was on my birthday. Best birthday present I ever had. Because there's no chance of, everybody knows, there's just no chance of surviving pancreatic cancer if you don't have this surgery. In general, there may be a couple outliers, but in general, you have to have the surgery to give yourself a chance. And I had a terrific, I had a terrific surgeon there and great care, and they're still involved today. One of my medical oncologists, I have 3 medical oncologists. You'd think one would be enough for most people, but no, I've chosen to have 3. And so Dr. Sanar is there, and she's one of the lead oncologists that's helping direct me, along with Dr. DeAndre and Dr. Chalapa at Sutter, Roseville, all of which play a role in my care, and actually I play a role. And I think that's one of the editorials I would offer is that if you do have or at least for me, having the illness I've had, taking control in some meaningful way and participating with your healthcare provider is essential. You have to become part of it. Otherwise, you're just in a standard process, and you may or may not like the outcome. At least by participating, you can help make decisions, and then I own the outcome. Good or bad, I own it because I help to participate in it. So I went into remission right after 6 months of chemotherapy, which means basically the cancer was gone. But the odds of it coming back were very strong, and so I knew that, and it did come back. It came back in October of 2018. I started again with chemotherapy in November of 2018. There's that term of palliative care, and so palliative care is kind of my pedestrian way of saying it would be treat the symptoms because there really isn't a cure. And so, okay, that's good. I like having my symptoms treated. I like feeling good. But I'm here to help look for maybe not the cure, but something in between treat the symptoms and full cure. And so I think you'll see some of that as we go along. As I mentioned, I was introduced to Dr. DeAndre in January, and it's an integrative approach, changing diet, changing the way I think and act, and supplements and use of cannabis. The journey, so cancer diagnosis for anybody who has had it, survived it, people it's suffocating for the patient and the family. The first few months, the first 6 months, you are in a place that you've never been and never imagined you could be. And don't get on the web. Do not Google search your cancer. So let me tell you, nothing good comes from a Google search other than information, but mostly it's anxiety that you get. So stay away from the Google searches, or at least take them with a grain of salt if you choose to do that. So it becomes a reality, and as I mentioned, I've become a self-advocate, but I don't mean advocate in the sense of, my care providers weren't doing what they should be doing, because every one of them cares and is doing the best job that they can for you. But become part of that team. Become, advocate for yourself, and I don't know, force is probably not the right word, but encourage your healthcare providers to think maybe differently than they normally would, because they're busy. Our system today is it's a grind for our healthcare providers, and they're doing a terrific job. But, you're one of 50 patients they need to see in a day. So you've got to find a way to interact with them in a meaningful way. First order of business for me is hope. So for anybody here who knows somebody or maybe is dealing with the disease themselves, is that you need hope, because without it, you're sinking. Every day you're sinking. So for the first few months, when you're in the suffocating mode, there is no hope. Really, you have surgery, and it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And And so it's looking for ways to get up and go, okay, maybe we're making headway here. And so that builds on itself. Understanding and belief in the process that you're on. And if you don't believe it, intervene on your own behalf and try and change that process. Second order of business is trying to get normal. Standing up here in front of you today is normal. This is like, here I am. I'm participating with an audience of, and a virtual audience. And so this is normal for me. And that's important. You start to feel like a real person again. And I think that builds on hope and getting normal and feeling good. And if nothing else, it extends your time here, and potentially it can really extend your time here indefinitely, at least until what you would have had without the disease. Let's see, stamina. For me, what I've learned is stamina is important. Every day is small steps, some forward, some back, but mostly forward. I have to say, in my case, as my last sentence here, every day is a good day, even the bad ones, because it's another day. So keep that in mind. It's another day. So there really are no really bad days when you're in a situation like myself and millions of others in the country are. Today, so chemotherapy, continuing it with the integration. One of the things, I'm a type A guy. I made my life in healthcare, imaging, and wound healing, and a number of other healthcare endeavors. But I had to get out of the type A mode and get more into the mind-body mode, and so the fight or flight syndrome, I learned pretty quickly. Dr. DeAndre coached me and said, hey, look, when you're fighting, you're shutting down all your immune system. And what you want to do is have your immune system help you fight this. Chemotherapy can do it, but your body got you into this mess. Maybe, there's a body of thinking that says your body can get you out of this mess. So let it help. And so I had to change that. And I never use the term anymore, I'm going to beat this cancer. I'm not trying to beat it. I just want to live with it. And so the flight mode is, I don't think that's the right word, but it's more of acquiescing and trying to live within the disease you have. And so my thinking is, why not create a symbiotic state, right? And so I did. I've changed it. I have 2 metastatic tumors, and I thought, well, gee, if I'm gonna live with this thing, I ought to name them. So their names are so those tumors have a name, Heckle and Jekyll. And I talked to them pretty regularly, and when I was dialing in my THC doses so I could sleep and eat, yeah, they actually talked back a couple times. So that's not happening so much anymore. I've kind of got the dosage down, but there were some times we had some great conversations, and I'm happy to have them at any time with them. Sometimes I just do, and so I'm continuing with various forms, and this is where someone like Dr. DeAndre with an integrative perspective. So I'm taking THC, THCA, CBDs, full plant extracts, and then every couple of weeks I'll get an email from Dr. DeAndre. Hey, look, I just got some new information out of Israel. I want you to try this. And so when I met her, I said, I want to be your lab rat. And so I've become, for better or worse, I'm your lab rat. And I'm happy to be. So my primary goal is stabilization of the disease. And so it's not progressing. Stage 4 has this connotation. It's simply a measure. Stage 4 just means where it is and how big it is. It doesn't mean that you're doomed. And I'm not, at least not in my mind. And secondary goal is, can I create a chronic disease state? Cannabis, I think, the cannabinoids I'm taking, I think, have allowed me to create a bit of a chronic disease state where, it's there, it's not going away, but it's in a form that I can live with. And I can do my day-to-day activities. And there's no shortage of a honey-do list that my wife Cindy has for me for the bar at any given time. So, I've demonstrated it's stabilized, and people are treating me like it is stabilized. And the tertiary goal is, is remission possible? And I think just jumping back to the mind-body thing, I've met hundreds of people at Golden Era. Every one of them is either wishing me well, praying for me to whatever spirit that they choose, the hugs, the well-wishing, all that adds up. That adds up with the all the things you're doing with Western medicine. So if you know somebody that's in that state, don't stop. And for those of you that I recognize in the audience that are coming in, don't stop because it does help. It truly helps. The last slide I have is, so here's the data. And when we talked about this presentation with Dr. DeAndre and I spoke about this, like, let's hinge this in data, not innuendo, and let's try and hinge it in the best science we can. So this is me. And so this is me in May of 18 when I'm in remission. See, it's at 0. And these numbers are CA19-9. That marker, but at least my tumor type has a specific tumor marker that you can test with a blood test. And in my case, it is very, very sensitive to what that tumors are doing. And so if that number goes up, tumors are growing. They're becoming metabolically active. Number goes down, hey, they're not as active. That means that they're quieting down and they're not spreading. And so you can see nothing, but then as the year went on, I could see these tumor markers going up, boom. And that's, nobody wants that number. Nobody wants a number beyond that, but that's pretty substantial. And there are people with the disease I have that are in the 75,000 range, so they have huge burdens of tumors. And so this is just an early warning system. This is like my tsunami warning system here. And so when I started the integrative approach, now some of this could be chemo, but I would like to think that the approach has allowed it to drop, and Dr. DeAndre can comment on that later, but and it has stabilized it. And so this is stabilization. It's not up here and it's not growing. So this is from March to November, and I just had this test about a week ago. And so, and in between there are breaks I took to go on vacation, because part of this is, part of this whole thing was, okay, man, I'm on there's a bucket list. Well, I'm on the accelerated bucket list right now. And so, I said, I'm going to Hawaii for a month, and I'm going to Europe with my best friends for, a month. And so that's what this is. And one of these breaks is I had an abscess that had formed, but the rest of this is me taking voluntary breaks and working with my healthcare providers to acknowledge that was maybe not their preferred method, but at least it was acceptable. So it's working for me, and that's the quality of life part. Okay, enough about me. Now let's get on to why you're here. So Dr. DeAndre is the chair of the Department of Oncology for the Sutter Medical Group for Sacramento and Sierra region. This is her basically her CV, her education. She's a Northern California native, UC Davis Medical School grad, University of Virginia residency, a 4-year fellowship at Mayo Clinic in hematology and oncology, and this year became a member of functional medicine. So it is my pleasure and great honor to introduce Dr. Stacey DeAndre.
Good evening, Nevada City. Thanks everyone for coming out. Appreciate it. I'd like to thank our sponsors tonight for making this evening happen. And I'd like to give a special round of applause to Steve, even going through chemotherapy. He helped organize all of this for us. So thank you. Thank you. So a little bit about myself. You've heard I've practiced medical oncology for about 17 years and just standard chemotherapy. And I became interested in integrative medicine a few years ago, mainly due to my own health issues. And I took some courses and started learning about it and asking, why aren't we doing this in regular medical oncology? So about a year ago, I went to Sutter and I said, I'd like to change my practice. And about 6 months ago, they agreed, and I started an integrative oncology practice. So I have that open in Sacramento and Roseville. So I'm not giving chemotherapy much anymore. What I'm doing is working with patients like Steve on diet, lifestyle, supplements, and also the safe and appropriate use of medical cannabis. That's part of my practice. So I have a disclaimer. I'm not a personal experienced cannabis user myself, and if you don't believe me, my mom is right here. She can tell you that I've been pretty much a super nerd. But Over the years, I've seen my patients come into the clinic and they tell me about how well they're doing and they're having, great benefit from medical cannabis. And I started taking courses and learning more and more about it. So this talk is really the culmination of my experience over the years and also the latest literature on medical cannabis. So Steve told me, we were talking a few weeks ago, that you can't see this very well, but Mark Twain was on this very stage in 1866. And he was giving a lecture on the Hawaiian Islands. And that's pretty amazing. So, Mark Twain was an interesting guy, very much a character. And he promised his audiences a lot of partying after the show. So a lot of whiskey drinking and looting and all kinds of monkey business. So I won't be doing any of that, but hopefully you'll have an entertaining night anyway. And this is just a quote I borrowed from Mark Twain, a little paraphrase here. So tonight, the medicinal use of cannabis will be the subject of my lecture when I get to it. And I shall endeavor to tell the truth as nearly as a physician can. If I embellish it with a little nonsense, that makes no difference. It won't mar the truth. It is only as the barnacle ornaments the oyster by sticking to it. So here's our agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history, a little about our own internal cannabinoid system, which is incredibly fascinating. What is cannabis? What's the difference between cannabis and hemp? There's all this out there, and so we'll try to answer that. Methods of using cannabis. So a little bit about pharmacology, and why are we using it? What are we doing with cancer? Dosing, side effects, practical issues, and then we'll do a couple of case studies. And then after that, we'll have our panelists come up and answer all of your questions. So history. So the cannabis sativa plant actually predates humans, and it was used mostly in the past for raw material, so for rope and for clothing and food. And hemp seeds are actually quite nutritious. Early use in Chinese medicine, it was documented as early as 2600 BC. And in the New World, again, it was mainly used for raw materials. And it wasn't until the 1800s that Dr. O'Shaughnessy brought it into the medical use forum. And at that time, it was used as mainly teas and tinctures. And it was used for pain, rheumatism, and epilepsy at that time. Sounds familiar? So it was widely used before it became essentially illegal in 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act. And Bayer and many other companies, they put medical cannabis in their products. So we've got some examples here. So here's One Night cough syrup containing alcohol, cannabis, chloroform, and morphine. So that, that will probably knock out your cough, but you may not wake up. That's some good stuff. We might need to bring the One Night back. I think it's good stuff. Here's another one. So this is Victor Infant's Relief. So this has cannabis indica, sweet spirits of niter, and chloroform for looseness of the bowels. For a child 2 days old, use 1 drop. Crazy. So this is what was around. They had all of these old-timey remedies, but it worked. And so, but 1937 came to a pretty much a halt at that point. So a little more, fast forward a few years, THC was actually isolated and synthesized in the 60s. In 1970, under Nixon, it became Schedule 1. And so research and development basically stopped at that time. And just to put it in perspective, what Schedule 1 is. So that includes heroin, ecstasy, and LSD. So that's where cannabis sits right now in this country. It's even more regulated than Schedule II drugs, such as cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, which cause way more problems than cannabis ever has. So this needs to change. Cannabis needs to be taken out of Schedule I status. We are so behind in research. We're 50 years behind in research because we can't do it in this country. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. So in the 80s, they discovered brain receptors for cannabis. So CB1 receptors were discovered, and we'll talk about the our own body's endogenous cannabinoid system. We actually make our own, which is super interesting. In 1996, California legalized medicinal use. In 2012, Oregon and other states followed. But again, in this year, still very limited research. And I'll tell you how hard it is to do research in this country with cannabis. You have to have a special DEA license that takes a year or more to get. And if you are doing a clinical trial, you have to get the cannabis from a specific government grow place. And the quality of that is very poor, and it's really not what's representative of what's used in this country. There are also, research studies that are done using synthetic type of cannabinoids, but as you'll see, those are not as good. And so that's why we're stuck right now, and we're relying on studies out of Europe to help guide us into what we should be using for our patients. So moving on, so we have receptors for cannabis in our body. If you think about why do we have that? It's really interesting. We don't have them so that you can, get high. They're there for a reason. So there are CB1 receptors that are in your central nervous system, your brain, and in the peripheral nerves. And this system is really important in terms of mood, appetite, stress response, and pain. And it helps modulate basically keeping the body in balance. CB2 receptors are found mostly in the immune system, so especially on the B cells of the immune system, but pretty widely distributed. And what they do is they calm down the immune system. So they are immunomodulatory and immunosuppressive. So what about these endogenous cannabinoids? So we make chemicals in our body that are similar to cannabis. So these are just two of the common ones. One is called 2-arachidonyl glycerol, and the other one is anandamide, which is very similar to THC. And these are very important in our body. They help maintain balance in our body. And the system that is in place in our body is made up of these endocannabinoids, the receptors, so the CB1 and CB2 receptors and other receptors, and then enzymes that actually degrade these chemicals. Really important functions in the body. In fact, this system has been preserved through, it's in fish, sea squirts, and lower mammals, so it's important. It's been preserved through all of that time. And it's important in maintaining balance in the body, adapting to stress, pain, appetite, memory, reproductive functions, and sleep. Also important in modulating the immune response. So it's really an important system. And when things go wrong in our endocannabinoid system, guess what happens? Diseases. We get sick. So here's a whole list of things that can happen when your endocannabinoid system or endocannabinoid tone is out of balance. So things like neurodegenerative diseases, Parkinson's, glaucoma, hypertension, diabetes, anxiety, eating disorder, obesity, schizophrenia, fibromyalgia, migraines, IBS, irritable bowel, PMS and fertility issues, and neuropathic and other pain syndromes. That's pretty interesting. Now, when I was in medical school, they had barely even known about this system. I didn't learn about it until a few years ago. So this is pretty new stuff, and it's fascinating. I'll give you an example. In fibromyalgia patients, so fibromyalgia is a tough disease. Fibromyalgia patients have poor sleep, they have achiness, their quality of life is very poor. And many of them can't work, they're in a lot of pain. And they've measured the levels of endocannabinoids in those patients, and they're low. So when you give these patients back cannabinoids, so if they take them exogenously, they're replacing what their body is not making. And guess what happens? 80% of the time, they feel better. They have improved quality of life, and they have less pain. So that's a very good example of where your body is not in balance. What you're doing with the cannabis is putting it back into balance. Now, we want to work on other things with those patients as well. We want to work on their diet. We want to get them moving. But, you need to break the chain somewhere. So just a great example of how it can be useful. So how do we modulate our endocannabinoid system? So kind of some common sense things. We can enhance our endocannabinoid system by exercising. We can also do it by enjoyable social activities. Some spices and foods can enhance your cannabinoid system. So curcumin, very popular now, which is actually a very good all broad anti-inflammatory. CBD actually increases your endogenous cannabinoids. Tylenol and NSAIDs increase them, and that may be why they work in terms of treating pain. Things that inhibit your endocannabinoid system include alcohol, chronic steroids, stress, poor diet, and some genetic tendencies to having a poor endocannabinoid tone. But again, like everything in the body, it's all about balance. We don't want too much endocannabinoids in our body. There was an example of a patient who underwent surgery and she had no pain at all, didn't need anything post-op. It was a pretty big abdominal surgery. And the doctors were so impressed, she had needed nothing. And they actually measured her levels of her cannabinoids in her body. Pretty interesting that they did that. She had very high levels. So she had a very high tone in her body of endocannabinoids. And that's great. She didn't have any pain. She was actually really chill, didn't have anxiety, no fear. But her problem was she had memory issues. So you can see going too far one way is not good, so there has to be a balance in the body. All right, so I'm going to try here to raise your endocannabinoid levels. Figure this out. Had a little video embedded today. Yeah. Yeah, I am. It's not. Oh, there it goes.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently, they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell.
Ah, man. That's some heavy shit, man. Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
I think we're parked, man.
All right, I gotta stop it now. If I can record this. There we go. All right, so that got your endocannabinoid system upregulated a little bit, just a little laughter. Okay, so let's move on to talk a little bit about what's in cannabis. So everyone's heard of CBD now, it's everywhere. So CBD and THC are just two things in the plant, but those are the most common things that we know of. But we'll talk about some of the others as well. So we know that you can find different ratios of the plant. You can have also drugs that have been synthesized that contain different ratios of CBD and THC. So dronabinol and nabilone are examples of THC dominance. Epidiolex is the first FDA-approved drug that was synthesized from plants. It is CBD heavy, and so that is an example of a CBD dominant strain. And then there's mixed 1-to-1 ratios of CBD and THC. And Sativex is not available in this country. It's available in Europe and Canada. But you can see that all of our plant products you can get in all of these different ratios, and that will be important as we go forward. So here is a nice pretty plant I took a picture of. This is a high CBD plant. And again, CBD is everywhere now. So this was actually in Colorado. It was a Carl's Jr. CBD infused burger. For real. So it's everywhere. It's in the gas station. I was at the gym and they're selling CBD stuff at the gym, and there's a problem with that. We'll talk about why that can be a problem, mainly because it's hemp derived. So, and we'll talk about the difference between hemp and then cannabis products. So CBD by itself does have a lot of good properties. So it's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-anxiety, it is neuroprotective, it helps with seizures, anticonvulsant. It can even treat pain and decrease our need for opioids, and it may have an anti-cancer effect even by itself. So CBD can be useful. Now, CBD is very complicated. It doesn't just bind to those CB1 and CB2 receptors. In fact, it really doesn't bind to those very much. It has over 65 targets in the body. How complicated the system is. But it binds to many receptors that have to do with inflammation. So CBD basically downregulates inflammation. It inhibits a couple of enzymes called cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase, and that's how Motrin works. It inhibits cyclooxygenase. So it's kind of interesting. And also, it can kind of detoxify, or however you want to say that, the effects of THC. So if you're having too much effect from THC, CBD downregulates that effect. Here's a pretty high THC plant, and you can see the little white bulbs on the plant. Those are called trichromes, and those are filled with the cannabinoids. So THC also has a lot of different effects other than what people are, they know about it as it causes euphoria and it's psychoactive, but it also is a muscle relaxant. It may have anti-cancer properties, especially in animal models. It has shown that. Anti-seizure, anti-nausea, lowers blood pressure, bronchodilator, pain modulator, anti-inflammatory, and also neuroprotective. So many, many different. THC mimics those endogenous cannabinoids that we have in our body, and it binds to the CB1 and CB2 receptors. So it's a little more straightforward than CBD. Now, there are some other products in cannabis. So the minor cannabinoids are, there's many of them. I just listed a few. There's a ton of them. But CBN is one that is present in the stored form or the degraded form. It's been sitting around for a few years. And that may cause sort of that couch lock or very sedating effect. There's CBC, CBN, CBG, and all of these are less well studied, but have important properties. And they are mostly anti-inflammatory, and they may be involved. And again, these minor cannabinoids play a role. They have a part in what the plant does. They're not present in those synthesized forms, so you're missing out on these minor cannabinoids when you have a synthesized product. So the acid form of the plant, I think, is really interesting to me, especially because of its possible anti-cancer effects. So in the raw plant, actually, it's in an acid form, and it has to be heated and turned into the active form or a different form. So THCA or THC acid is the raw form. You heat it and it becomes THC. The interesting thing is that THC acid is not psychoactive. And THC acid also may have a lot of other effects different from THC. It binds to different receptors. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it's called a PPAR inhibitor, and that's important in cancer. That may be an anti-cancer agent. Again, we need more research on it, but it's very interesting that the raw form has different properties than the heated form. Same thing with CBDA. So CBDA is in the raw plant. You heat it, it becomes CBD. It is a very potent COX-2 inhibitor, and so again, going back to Motrin or NSAIDs, those are COX inhibitors. So it's working in the same manner in terms of an anti-inflammatory. It also may be good for anticipatory nausea and vomiting. A lot of our patients, they get sick just even thinking of going into infusion. And so that's a hard condition to treat, but this may be useful. And preclinical studies, meaning in animals and in cell culture models, show anti-cancer activity of the acid forms. So terpenes are also present in the plant. So terpenes are organic compounds that are produced by the plant, and they're in there to protect the plant from predators. And it gives the plant its characteristic aroma and flavor. And it can basically give it the plant its activating or sedating features. So that may be actually more important in terms of how the plant makes you feel. The terpenes may be the most important factor in that, not whether it's a certain strain or not. And you can sort of choose your terpene profile. So here are just some examples of some of the terpenes. So myrcene is a common terpene that is more sedating, and it has more of an earthy or clove-like smell, whereas pinene has a pine scent and is actually more activating. So that these do play a role and are present in the natural plant. So chemovar is a term that describes the chemical variety within the plant. So all of the things. So the CBD, the THC, the terpenes, all of the minor cannabinoids. And these things are important because nature, gives us these things so that they can act in a synergistic fashion and work better than when you pull them out and try to do them separately. So that's called the entourage effect. We get more out of the whole plant than when we pull things out of it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between hemp and cannabis. They're really the same thing, just a different strain of the plant. So the hemp plant, is a tall plant, and it's, again, used more for its fiber. It doesn't have as many flowers compared to the cannabis flower, cannabis sativa flowering plant. So that has much more cannabinoids actually in the flowered form. Now, the reason this has become a thing lately is because hemp is legal. It's very confusing. But hemp is legal as long as it contains less than 0.3% THC. And again, you have to use a lot of the product, harvest a lot of the hemp in order to get the CBD. Now, the problem with hemp products is they're often contaminated. They suck up a lot of the pesticides and kind of a scavenger plant. And there was a study done in JAMA that showed 70% of hemp products online were mislabeled. So they either had less CBD or more CBD, and they also 21% of the time had more THC than they were supposed to. So some people got a little surprised when they got their Amazon box delivered. So, it's tough because many states don't have access to THC. The only thing they have access to is CBD through a hemp-derived product. So the point is, you really want to look at the quality of your hemp product if that's what you're choosing to use. Whereas cannabis, at least in California, it's very regulated here. We know what's in it. We know it's clean. It's tested. And again, we don't need to use as much. It's a more potent form of the cannabinoids. But again, we're back to Schedule 1. So we're stuck with that. All right, so, hey girl, don't stress about pharmacology. Love is the only drug. So we'll talk about pharmacology. I'll try to make it not so painful, even though it is very painful. So the routes of administration. How do we give cannabis? What are the mechanisms of how we get it in? So inhaling it, smoking it, obviously quick onset, whether you're smoking it or vaping it. Some people juice, so they take the raw plant and they actually put it in juice and mix it up, so they're getting the acid form. But that's hard to do. You have to grow your own or have an access to a large amount of plant. There are oils, so full extract cannabis oils. They're very thick and tarry, very usually potent, have a lot of cannabinoids in them. There are tinctures, which are a little more, they're a little more diluted, and those are often extracted using alcohol or CO2 extraction. And those you can put under your tongue. If you hold it there, supposedly they have a faster onset than swallowing it. Edibles are very common in our practice. A lot of our cancer patients really like the edible form, but it takes a long time for those to kick in. So it can take 1 to 2 hours before people notice an effect. And the problem that has happened is people take it, and 2 hours later, they're like, I don't feel anything. I'm just going to eat the rest of that cookie. And then they're like, whoa. They're out of it, and they, sometimes in a bad way, and then they give up. Then they're like, oh, that stuff, it made me sick. I'm never using that again. So that's what we want to avoid. We don't want people to throw this away as it may have a potential for helping them. We just have to tell them how to do it the right way the first time. So there's also suppositories, which I don't really promote. I don't think they're absorbed very well. So I'm not really a fan of that method. There are topical creams, and we'll talk about what those can be useful for. But broadly, they can be useful for arthritic pain and also for neuropathy. And there are transdermal patches as well. Expensive, but available. So edibles are basically put into fat, and they get absorbed very slowly. They change in the body when they get metabolized through your liver into a very potent psychoactive chemical, 11-OH-THC. So when you do an edible, you may have a different feeling than if you use a different form of the plant. They can affect other drug levels in your body, and that's where the pain comes in, is that our body has a system of enzymes called the CYP system in the liver, and they basically compete. So it's complicated, but there are drug interactions that can occur. Oil-based are similar to edibles. Tinctures, if you hold these under your tongue, you might get a little faster onset, 15, 30 minutes maybe, but mostly they're swallowed and have a longer onset of action. Inhaling it, very quick onset, 2 to 10 minutes, peak levels. So drugs are metabolized by the liver. Some drugs will inhibit the system, other drugs will activate it. So if you go to the doctor and they give you a drug, they say, don't take grapefruit with this drug, it's going to interact. So same idea, we have to look at these drug-drug interactions. There can also be genetic differences in how people metabolize cannabis. So some people can take it in the evening and it goes to them really quickly. They wake up and they're fine. Other people, they wake up and they're still a little groggy. So just like caffeine, same idea, same sort of enzyme system that is metabolizing these drugs. So this is how my head feels when I have to deal with this. It's like my head is going to explode like Kramer, because it's a very complex system, and I have patients coming in and they're on a whole bunch of supplements and they're on a whole bunch of pharmaceuticals, and I have to look it all up and say, okay, how are these drugs going to interact? So it is. Now, some of the most common drug interactions with cannabis include the following. So Coumadin, it can raise your levels of Coumadin if you're on a significant amount of cannabis. Seizure medicines, so certain types of seizure medicines that are listed, their levels can also rise when you're using a lot of cannabis. Statins, some antibiotics and antifungals, some blood pressure medicines. But in general, the dosing that we're using in the clinic is pretty low, and we don't see a lot of drug-drug interactions. Stimulants, so if you take a stimulant along with cannabis, that may not do well for some people. They may get a little more paranoia and psychoactive effect. Anticholinergic drugs like Benadryl or Wellbutrin, those can actually also worsen the psychoactive effects. Sedatives, so if you're taking Ativan or Valium and you're using cannabis, there can be a potentiation of the sedation. Now, the interesting thing is that the CB1 receptors that THC binds to, they're not present in the brainstem. So cannabis does not make you stop breathing like opioids. That's why people overdose and die of opioids, because the cannabis makes you stop breathing. Cannabis doesn't do that. So cannabis is safe to use with these. It's just you have to know that you may have potentiation of sedation. Inhaled can also cause different effects in terms of blood levels of theophylline or chlorpromazine. So I think it's important for patients to at least tell their docs, hey, do you think this is safe for me? And have their doctor check it. There are websites now that are available to all physicians, and they can look it up. So one thing I'd like to say about cannabis and immunotherapy. So immunotherapy is, a new thing in terms of anti-cancer activity. And what we're trying to do there is stimulate the patient's immune system to fight the cancer. You've seen all the ads on TV, mostly in lung cancer and melanoma. Now, cannabis is doing the opposite. So it's suppressing the immune system. And when we're trying to raise it with immunotherapy, we kind of have a contraindication there. And there was a study done out of MD Anderson, and they looked at 140 patients who were on immunotherapy, And they found a lower response rate in cannabis users who were on immunotherapy. So I try to counsel our patients, if you're on this, you probably should not use cannabis. The non-users were 3.17 more times more likely to respond. So why are we using cannabis? So the National Academy of Sciences published this report in 2017, and so this is available for reading if you would like to. But basically, it talks about the uses of cannabis. There is conclusive or substantial evidence that it helps with pain, anti-nausea, and spasticity from like multiple sclerosis, which can be very painful. Moderate benefit found for sleep disorder associated with apnea, fibromyalgia, pain, and multiple sclerosis. So going back to the Schedule 1 deal, Schedule 1 means no medicinal benefit. Yet the National Academy of Sciences is saying that there is. So there's a discongruence here, and that needs, again, to be fixed. It is approved already. It's been around for a long time in the synthetic form. So THC has been around for nausea and for AIDS patients who have wasting syndromes. Epidiolex, as I mentioned earlier, is a high CBD strain, and that is useful for some childhood epilepsy disorders. Sativex is approved in Canada for cancer pain and also for multiple sclerosis, and that's a 1-to-1 mix, CBD-THC. So what do we do really in the clinic? What is it used for? So in our practice, it's pain. It's reducing our use of opioids and other pain medicines. It's useful for anxiety and depression, nausea, appetite, and sleep. Those are the most common uses that we see in the clinic. Here's a slide showing that patients were substituting their prescriptions. So the top line is narcotics and opioids. So a lot of patients are, substituting cannabis. It's harder to get the opioids now, right? It's really tough, and so patients are now using this and actually able to get off of their opioids. Also using it for sleep instead of Ambien, instead of Ativan, which produce horrible type of sleep. They're using cannabis. So nausea, again, has been around. THC has been useful for nausea in terms of synthetics. We don't have a lot of trials with a natural plant, but certainly we've seen that useful in the clinic. CBD, again, may be useful for that anticipatory nausea. Patients, are thinking about going in for chemotherapy and they start getting sick. Anorexia. So how do we improve appetite? So again, THC has been very useful in that situation. Even small doses have been shown to improve appetite. Again, with the actual plant, we're lacking clinical trials, but there is some evidence and papers out there show that helps as well. The plant, when we use the plant form as opposed to the synthetic form, food may actually taste better, and some trials are showing that it improves quality of life. So pain is the real reason that many patients turn to medical cannabis. It decreases inflammation. Cannabis works at all levels throughout your body. It works in the brain, it works in the spinal cord, and it works out in the peripheral nerves. So it's affecting the whole system of pain. It also modulates how we experience pain. So it has multiple mechanisms of action. We know that it can synergize with opioids, so you don't need to take as many opioids, and many patients are able to come off of them. We know that in cancer pain, about 20 milligrams of THC, which is a decent dose, that's equal to about 120 milligrams of codeine, but it has more psychoactivity. Now, studies are consistently showing that patients who are using cannabis take less opioids. So states with legalized status have decreased prescriptions and less opioid deaths and less opioid overdoses. In a Minnesota registry study, 64% of those on opioids reduced or stopped opioids within 6 months. That's pretty remarkable. In an open label study done I believe it was in Israel, they gave patients 20 grams, I call it a variety pack. They just gave them some stuff they could smoke and some oils and different things and said, hey, use this, take it, titrate it up to its effect, and we're going to monitor you and see what happens. And 44% of those patients were able to stop their opioids. That's pretty impressive. And it improved their quality of life and pain scores. Jason Sulak also reported on his series of patients where 40% were able to stop opioids and 40% were able to reduce their dose. So again, many, many studies are coming out with evidence showing that it does help reduce opioid use. In cancer pain, we know that a combo of THC, CBD does seem to work the best for our cancer patients. In this study, there was a significant reduction in pain and less breakthrough medicines were used. 60% did have side effects though. So again, it all depends on how you're titrating it up. If you go too fast, you're gonna have more side effects. And those were somnolence, so being tired, a little bit dizzy, a little bit of nausea. But there were no serious adverse events with cannabis use. This was a large study, 3,000 patient study, and they showed that quality of life was improved from baseline. Basically, it improved pain. These were cancer patients who had significant pain. They also reported improvements in sleep, fatigue, nausea, and vomiting. And again, it seems to be consistent in the literature that about 35 to 40% of patients are able to stop their opioids. Another interesting study is that there's this thing in cannabis called the biphasic dose response. So a little bit is not enough. Too much is not good either. You got to find the sweet spot. And that sweet spot is going to be different basically for every person. In this study, this was cancer patients with poorly controlled pain. And they found in this population a spray, a 1-to-1 spray, at about a dose of 20 milligrams was the sweet spot for this population of patients. When they took the dose higher, it didn't help their pain as much. So you need to titrate up to where you're getting a response, and you don't need to go more. More is not better. People always think, oh, if I take more, it's going to be better. Not with this. Not with many things. So neuropathy. So neuropathy, cannabis, many, many studies, especially animal models and lots of case reports show that it can help with neuropathy. We know that inhaled cannabis can help with AIDS-associated neuropathies. And I can tell you in our clinic, we're seeing more and more benefit from the topical use of cannabis. So we're collecting that data right now and hope to publish that. It's been quite effective, and it's not being absorbed into the body. So you're not getting any of the side effects from taking it internally. So anxiety and sleep, these are biggies in our clinic, and I think just in the general population. So anxiety is a huge problem in our country. CBD can be useful by itself for anxiety, and the dose range is highly variable. 25 to 175 milligrams can be helpful. Even up to 600 milligrams, which is a pretty huge dose, has been used for social anxiety. Again, CBD can be also used to calm down the effects of THC. So if you have bad side effects from THC, CBD can help with that. So sleep is very complicated. The literature is kind of all over the map with regards to sleep. But it seems that THC is required if you're going to use a cannabis product, you need a little THC to help. Now, the caveat to that is if you have a lot of anxiety as a cause of your insomnia, then CBD may help you. But for the most part, most people do need a little bit of THC. What we don't know is the long-term effect of using this for years and years. What is that doing to our sleep architecture? We just don't have the studies yet. But I think, for our patients, especially when they're going through chemo, it's really hard for them to sleep and relax. It can certainly be very, very useful for them. These are just some neurologic indications. So epilepsy, muscular MS spasticity, schizophrenia, dementia. So these are all being studied. This is a really interesting study. It was a chart review in elderly patients. And they looked at patients 75 to 102. Can you imagine giving a 102-year-old? So, but they did. And the average exposure to cannabis was a few months. And 34% did report side effects, but these were easily managed with controlling the dose. Nearly 70% reported an improvement in their symptoms. Their pain was improved. Again, 32% reduced their opioid use, 18% with improvement in sleep. And only 3.4% discontinued due to side effects. So it was really well tolerated, even in a very elderly population. And they found in this population, the 1-to-1, 1 part THC to 1 part CBD was broadly useful for this patient population. Here's our study. This is hot off the presses. I had to update my slides because we just got this information in. So we collected a questionnaire in our Sacramento location of all of our patients downtown, and it was 775 patients answered the questionnaire. 24% reported using cannabis. And this is just all comers. Now, in my practice, in the integrative oncology practice, it's closer to 50% of my patients are actually using medical cannabis. So a little lower in the general oncology population. They are using it for pain. They're using it for sleep and nausea, anxiety, mood, appetite, and neuropathy. Most are using edibles, 44%. 50% are using oils and tinctures. Vaping, 26%, smoking, 30%, topical use, 17%. And 58% are using more than one method. So they might use an edible at night, and then they may use a little puffing during the day because it can act very quickly for them. So did it help? This is pretty impressive. Marked improvement, 40%. Moderate improvement, 41%. Only 12.8% said little to no improvement in their symptoms. So that's 81% of our cancer patients are reporting an improvement in their symptoms. That's pretty impressive, I think. That's better than anything prescribed. And the cost per month, we asked that question as well. 66% were using $100 or less a month. That's pretty cheap too. And 22% were using between 100 and 200, and a smattering were using more than that. So here's the big question that I get asked every day. Can cannabis kill my cancer? So here's a book that was on the internet I found. Marijuana killed my cancer, and it's helping me keep me cancer free. So I think that is very complicated, and we don't know the answer to that yet. And I'll show you why we don't know that. So yes, but in animal models, we know that cancer cells have upregulated cannabinoid receptors. They have more CB1 or CB2 receptors. Animal models do show that cannabis and cannabinoids can have anti-cancer activity. THC and CBD both have shown decrease in invasion and spread of cancer cells in animal models. Also, the cannabis can enhance the effect of chemotherapy, and it can actually enhance the effect of radiation therapy. This was done in mice, and they combined radiation, and with the combination, it significantly decreased the tumor size compared to either treatment alone or placebo. Multiple cell studies, again, animal models, we're not animals, we're not cell models, but shows that a combination of THC and CBD may be the most beneficial in terms of anti-cancer effect. And that's been done in a lot of cell culture models. Now, this was a very important paper that came out this year and got a lot of attention. And it just highlights the complexity of how we don't know yet what to use. So what they did is they took cell lines from different tumors. They had 12 different types of tumors: breast, colon, lung, brain. And then they took 12 different cannabis extracts, and they tested them against these strains of cancer cell lines. And what they found was that all the cell lines had a different response. So the breast cancer cell line responded differently than the colon, than did the prostate. They found one strain that was very broadly active. It was called CAN7, and it was a high THC strain. Making the matter even more complex, they had 2 different prostate cancer cell lines and 2 different breast cancer cell lines. They responded differently to different types of cannabis. So even within the same cell type, you get heterogeneity. It's not the same. Now, interestingly, the resistant lines, so the cell lines that did not respond at all, they didn't express those CB1 receptors. So that's interesting. Now, right now, we don't have a way to really check tumor cells for that, but we will be able to do that at some point. And we'll be able to say, hey, your tumor has these receptors, let's now use this cannabinoid against it. So we'll get there. We're just not quite there. The conclusions from this study was that there was a synergistic effect of the plant. So the whole plant worked better than extract. And you'll see that again and again in animal models. And we think that's true in people too. The effects were dose dependent. So in this situation, the higher the dose, it did matter in terms of killing cancer cells. And the effects were dependent on whether or not the cells expressed the receptors. So very interesting work. Here was a case series, and this is kind of what we get. In my world, I try to use evidence-based or at least evidence-informed, and there's just not a lot. So these are the type of studies that we get. This was a human case series of 119 patients given synthetic CBD. And they were using pretty low dose, 10 milligrams twice a day, 3 days on, 3 days off. And it took a long time to see an effect in some of these patients, even up to 6 months. They saw 2 remarkable responses in a brain tumor called an ependymoma. So these are usually in children, but they saw some good responses. They also saw a decrease in circulating tumor cells, which we can measure in the blood in patients with breast cancer and prostate cancer. But again, it's like, these are kind of anecdotal, and we just don't really know what this means yet. But at least they're publishing it, so we're starting somewhere. In brain tumors, so I treat brain tumors. They're tough. Our patients with brain tumors, it's incurable. Most patients live, 12 months or so. It's a tough disease. And there's been some work done in human studies using cannabis against brain tumors. So this was out of Great Britain. So they had 21 patients with glioblastoma, and half of them got cannabis as a 1-to-1, so THC, CBD 1-to-1 versus placebo. And they dosed it to their individualized tolerated dose, but Matt capped it out at about 30 milligrams. So not a high dose. 30 milligrams is, pretty reasonable. They had some side effects, but nothing major. Their 1-year survival in the cannabis group was 83% versus 53% in the placebo. Median survival 550 days versus 369 days. We need more information about this study. It hasn't been published yet, and there's some details I'd like to know, but it's something. And so, our patients are using cannabis for other reasons. They're using it to help them sleep and to feel better. So if we get this benefit for our brain tumor patients, so the bottom line with cancer, we have to take our wisdom from the dude. It's complicated, and we just don't know. So lots of ins, lots of outs, stuff. So dosing, low and slow is how we go with cannabis. That's the mantra. So, a lot of my patients are really nervous about using cannabis. A lot of them are a little older, and they're just very conservative, and they're worried that they're going to get, high, or they're going to have side effects. So we can start with baby doses. We can start with 1 milligram of THC or 2 milligrams of THC, and do that for a couple nights and see how you feel, depending on why you're using it. And then slowly titrate that up. So every few nights, if you're not feeling anything, go up by a few milligrams. That way you're not going to get into that trouble of eating the whole cookie and overdoing it. So if you start real low and slowly titrate up, you can find that therapeutic dose that will work. Most patients will eventually, as they increase their nighttime dose, in the morning they can start adding a lower dose and add that in during the day as needed. Some patients like to use a little CBD heavy product during the day, so they're not being impaired, and they use their THC heavier product at night to help them sleep. So that's a common use of it. Often about 20 milligrams may be needed in our cancer patient population for pain control and for sleep. And again, the inhaled form can be useful for breakthrough symptoms. So for nausea and for pain, it can be useful because it works really, really quickly. Again, a 1-to-1 ratio is very broadly useful. Of course, you'll have indications where you will want to use more CBD. So for an example, anxiety. You may really want to use a high CBD product. But 1-to-1 is very broadly useful and well tolerated. Some patients are very sensitive to THC. So they may want a different ratio. They may want to use maybe a 4-to-1 or an 8-to-1 where they're getting a little more CBD with the THC. And again, CBD by itself is useful for anxiety and pain. Here's just a little titration schedule, and you can see this is how they did it in the brain tumor study. They did one spray, which was 2.7 milligrams of THC at night. They did that for a couple nights. Then they went up to 2 sprays, eventually added in a morning spray, kept titrating up, and they did it quickly. I mean, this is a 14-day titration up in our brain tumor patients. So you don't have to go that fast, but that's just an example of, getting your dose titrated up to a therapeutic effect. So, here's the crux. Why are you using it? I ask all my patients, they come in and they're like, I'm using CBD. And I'm like, okay, why? What are we doing? You have to ask the question, why are you using it? Because that's going to direct the product and the dose, and the delivery that you want to achieve. So that's a really important question. So, hey guys, I think my new sleep medication has some side effects. And a lot of the sleep medicine. So side effects, THC is dose related. The more you take, the more side effects you will have. Common, dry mouth, drowsiness, dizziness, nausea. So those are just some common side effects. Again, there are drug interactions that we need to be mindful of. There is less dependence with THC than with benzodiazepines or opioids. So Ativan, Valium, all of those. Less dependence with cannabis. You can have withdrawal. In fact, in some clinical studies, up to 50% of patients will have some withdrawal, but it's mild. It's kind of like caffeine withdrawal. You may not sleep as well, have some weird dreams, so a little jittery, but it dissipates relatively quickly. Nothing like other withdrawal from other drugs. The cannabis is stored in the fat. Remember, cannabis is a lipophilic. It loves fat, and that's why it's put into fat. That's how we ingest it, and then it gets stored in our fat. So we have a slow release system, and that prevents a lot of the serious withdrawal. There is addiction potential with cannabis, but it is a low percentage. So they looked at just general states with cannabis use, and the addiction rate was around 9%. Now that's in recreational use. We don't see that type of problem so far in the medicinal area. So much lower problem in the medicinal use. But if someone has addictive issues and addictive potential, you just need to be mindful of that. It may not be the right thing for that person. Now, CBD can have side effects. People think, CBD doesn't have any side effects. I can take it and nothing will happen. Not necessarily true. It can be sedating. It can be activating. It can cause some bowel symptoms. It can cause changes in your appetite. So CBD does have some side effects. In the Epidiolex studies, these are very high-dose studies. They found fatigue, anemia, diarrhea, and feeling jittery were the most common side effects of CBD alone. And there's about 5 to 10% of patients that are really sensitive to CBD. So be careful, you must. We have to be careful in a few patients. So patients who have active cardiac disease, we don't want to have them, go smoke a whole bunch of cannabis because it lowers your blood pressure and it can raise your heart rate. Those are not good if you have active angina or heart problems. We have to be careful in our older patients. When you first start cannabis, you don't know, you might be a little off, you don't want people to fall. So you want to, if they're very elderly and a fall risk, you want to be sure they're monitored. And again, start with baby doses. Again, we don't advocate driving. There can be increased risk of motor vehicle accidents when you're using cannabis. Avoid in pregnancy, avoid in those with true psychiatric disorders, or leave it to a professional to decide whether it's useful, or those with true addictive problems. Again, we don't want to use in those who are very immunocompromised or those who are on immunotherapy, as it may interact with their treatment. There is a consent form that the California Medical Board does advocate for, so we have our patients sign that, and we put it in their chart just so that we're protected by the California Medical Board. We do recommend, and now things are pretty much child-proof, but you have to be careful because cookies and kids is probably not a good mix. And again, remember the drug interactions, especially with Coumadin and seizure medications. So practical issues. Why are you using cannabis? What is the reason? And this will point you toward the product, the ratio, and the route of administration. Have you used it before? Did you use it when you were a kid or when you were a teenager? How did it affect you? Because that can help determine what you're going to use for that patient. Medication interactions, remember the relative contraindications, start low and go slow. Have your patients keep a journal. Every night this is how they feel, and tracking it can kind of help you find that sweet spot, that therapeutic dose. And again, if someone overdoses and takes too much THC, they are not going to die. They may be uncomfortable. Keep them in a calm environment, and you can add a little CBD to that, and that can actually help attenuate some of that psychoactivity. So I know Game of Thrones is over, but I'm in withdrawal, so I had to put this for our case studies that are coming. So case 1, this is a 45-year-old guy with a brain tumor, and he had a brain tumor grade 3 15 years ago and kept it in check with a lot of integrative medicine. He used a lot of diet and supplements, and he didn't have a recurrence for a long time. But when he did, it was bad. It was a grade 4 glioblastoma. So he had a lot of insomnia. He had to take steroids, so he couldn't sleep. So we put him on a little THC at night. He actually was using a 1-to-1, and he wanted to mimic the brain tumor study. So with the THC, we used a CBD THC 1-to-1, and he just slept. He had a great sleep with that. And we titrated him up to he got up to actually about 50 milligrams of THC at night. He tried to add some during the day, but it was impairing his quality of life. So we left him alone at about that dose. And he's still on chemo and doing fine. So at this point, pretty stable. And he has a good quality of life. That's the most important thing. Here's another case. So this is a patient with cervical cancer, and she was getting chemotherapy and radiation. That's the main treatment that we use. It's pretty hard. A lot of diarrhea, a lot of side effects. And she used 5 milligram THC gummies for nausea during her treatment, very effective. And she also used vaping for quick onset. So that was kind of during her active treatment. But then when she completed her therapy, she had different problems. She had pain and insomnia. So we changed it up and we put her on some 1-to-1 at night, titrated her up to about 10 milligrams for sleep, which helped. And then during the day, we put her on a little heavier CBD, so a 4-to-1 ratio for CBD to THC, and titrated her up to about 20 milligrams of CBD. And she had improvement in her pain. So you can see during the journey, the different treatments that they're on, you might need to use different products for different problems. So again, why are you using it? Important. This is another patient. This was an older woman with recurrent ovarian cancer on chemotherapy. She was so depressed. She was so sad. It was so hard to see her come into the clinic. And she wasn't sleeping well. And she started a 1-to-1 edible at night. It was 5 milligrams, and she titrated that to 10 milligrams. And then she also took one additional lower dose during the day. And, within a few months, she'd come back in, and her depression completely lifted. It was life-changing for her. She was sleeping better. She was coping better. And, I can still see her, and unfortunately she's passed, but, she had a good quality for that last year of her life. So that was really, really, really awesome. So case 4. So when you're an oncologist, there's a funny thing that happens. It probably happens to doctors in general and nurses as well. People call you up and they'll say, hey, haven't talked to you in like 30 years, but my mom has cancer. Can you help her? So yeah, sure, we'll help her. So we brought her into the clinic, and she had breast cancer and had chemotherapy, and she had neuropathy. So neuropathy is numbness and tingling in your hands and feet, and it comes on with chemo. It can be really painful. It can be numb. It's not pleasant. The doctor put her on Neurontin or gabapentin, which has a lot of side effects. She didn't like it. It made her dizzy. So I made sure she didn't have diabetes. We checked some blood work. Her B6 level was a little high, so we held her multivitamins. And I told her, let's try some topical cannabis. It doesn't get absorbed. Just rub it on your feet at night and see what happens. So within 2 months, her neuropathy was 90% better, and she came off of Neurontin. She was very happy, and I didn't get any more phone calls. So that's how that usually works. All right, so we'll wind up here with a quote from Mark Twain. Be careful about reading health books. You may die of a misprint. And I just like to put in there, instead of books, we'll put in internet and Google, right? Because it's like the Wild West. Here's another one. So many of my patients, when they have cancer, they have really well-meaning friends and family that come out and say, hey, you got to try this supplement. Hey, did you read about this juice? You know, like, and the patients are overwhelmed. Like, should I take this stuff? Should I not take it? So this quote reminded me of that. So Mark Twain, replying to letters recommending remedies. Dear sir or madame, I try every remedy sent to me. I am now on number 67. Yours is 2,653. I am looking forward to its beneficial results. So hopefully tonight we've given you another remedy that you can consider or think about, either for yourself or for your patients. And there is more information out there. This is legit on the web. So cannabisclinicians.org is a society of docs that have done training and that are comfortable prescribing, and they have doctors in the area, in geographical areas that can help patients. Leafly, healer.com is a great website if you want to take courses in the basics of cannabis. Very easy to understand. Dustin Sulak, great course, and then a few other resources. So with that, we'll end fast time, and we will invite our panel up, and we will start taking questions. So thank you very much for your attention.
So we're going to take a few minutes, invite the panel up, and within 3 or 4 minutes, we'll get started. Any questions you have, please pass them to Maria or Cindy or Jessica or here, Joey, and we'll get them consolidated and get started. Test, test. Okay. Okay, so thank you, panelists, for joining us. So I think it might be beneficial if each of the panelists maybe gives 30 seconds of who they are and what they're here. So we'll start with Chris. Start on the end of the table.
Hi, I'm Chris Sanderson. I'm a local cultivator. I have a cannabis brand called Yellybird. Been in the cannabis business now for about 11 years. Yep, located here in Nevada County. Got manufacturing and distribution in Seaside over in Monterey area. Very excited about all the health benefits that cannabis is starting to be realized for. And, looking forward to um, having my business be a lot more part of working with people in the community, bringing that into my company to do a lot of research and growth in that. So I'm excited about all this.
Yes, my name is Wade Laughter. I came to use of cannabis to treat glaucoma, and the pharmaceutical drugs that are typically offered for glaucoma made me profoundly ill, and I wanted to be able to see for the rest of my life. So I started learning about cannabis as medicine. That was 1996, and in 2007, 2008, I found a cultivar named Harlequin that started my interest and enthusiasm for cannabidiol, or CBD. Have worked with a number of patients over the years, and I'm really grateful for Dr. DeAndre's presentation this evening, because it's lovely to see such good science, evidence-based information about this plant. Thank you.
Stacey.
My name is Daniel Batchelor. I'm an operator at Elevation 2477 here in Nevada City, where we're pretty much a pharmacy where people can come and get licensed, regulated, tested products with or without a medical recommendation. We are open to anyone 21 years of age or older, and we essentially facilitate the interaction between the customer and the plant, or the tincture, or the topical, or the vape pen, or any of the things that we carry.
Terrific. So, okay, first question, and perhaps we'll just ask the question, and the one best of our subject matter experts to answer it, we'll turf to them. So first question is, cannabis is still a Schedule I drug, so how do you prescribe it legally? I know where that goes.
Yeah. So we don't prescribe it. So we can't prescribe it. So you don't actually write out, a prescription. What you can write a prescription for is the synthetic form. So Marinol, Dronabinol, I can write Marinol 2.5 milligrams 3 times a day for nausea. But cannabis, we can't do that. But what we can do is at least guide our patients to the ratio, the dose that they may want to try, and then they can go to the dispensary and get those particular products. So the answer is, as we cannot prescribe it.
Okay, question number two. What reputable CBD companies do you recommend for tinctures?
So we carry several different products. Tinctures, we have ratios 30 to 1, 30 part CBD, 1 part THC, all the way to 3 part THC, 1 part CBD. So depending on the person's exact needs, we have a variety of different products to try to help accommodate them. Salves, we have a local company called Liquid Flower, which is produced here in Nevada City. We carry that. It has ratios of CBGs, CBCs, CBDAs, and THCs. So just come on in. We have several different products, and we have professionals who can help you find a product that works well for your exact condition.
Now I'm back. Okay, third question. Have you seen or heard of cannabis? Have you seen or heard of cannabis treating side effects for kidney failure and dialysis treatment? Any conflicting medications?
I have not seen specifically for kidney disease. Medication interactions would have to be, because some of those medications are, pretty intense. So I would definitely have your physician run it on the computer program that really checks for interactions, because it's you really should look that up. The ones that I gave are just the broad ones that a lot of people are on, but you should really check with your physician and have them check it out. But I haven't seen anything specific on dialysis or kidney
Next question. Where in the body are endogenous cannabinoids produced?
So the cannabinoids are produced on demand, basically in the neurons, essentially, and in the other lots of other organs. So it's an interesting system. They're not just like floating around all the time, or most of the time. They're actually, when there's a stress or a need for them, they're produced. Especially the like the anandamide is produced in the neuron, and it travels in a weird fashion. It works backwards, and it inhibits the other neuron that attaches to it. So it's a very complex system, and it's all over. Your entire body is filled with these receptors and these chemicals.
Any studies or success treating blood cancers? Example, leukemia, multiple myeloma.
So again, no. And the reason is, I'm sure there's anecdotal stories out there about, specific blood cancers, but I have not seen, a large case series with blood cancers as of yet. And again, that's why we need more research done in this field, because we just don't know.
I'm back. Considering the possible issues with mental health and cannabis, how can I help, or can it help schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia that's not really my area of expertise. I do know that it is being studied the use of cannabis is being studied. And people who have schizophrenia, I think, do have altered endocannabinoid systems. So I think there's something there. But cannabis has also been shown, in some people to promote some of those symptoms. So, I would be very uncomfortable in my practice if someone had a history of schizophrenia. I would be very uncomfortable prescribing it. I would really want to be working with a health professional who is knowledgeable about, a psychiatrist basically who's knowledgeable about those disorders. That just hasn't been my practice.
Is there a relationship of CBD in lowering testosterone in men as smoking weed does? And once I read it again. Is there a relationship of CBD in lowering testosterone in men as smoking weed does? Well, that's not part of the question. It's CBD. Is there a relationship of CBD lowering testosterone in men, I assume, like smoking weed does?
It's not my experience.
Not sure how to follow that. You want to expand on that later? Okay. What supplements for cancer? What supplements for cancer? Well, I can tell you everything you have me on. It's a long list.
It's not that long.
You should take it.
So that's a hard question. So there are a lot of things from nature that have anti-cancer properties, and each type of cancer you might want to use, a different profile of or natural products. So what I use, for example, in breast cancer patients, I use a lot of green tea. Green tea has been shown to actually preventative. I do use a lot of the medicinal mushrooms like turkey tail and reishi mushrooms to enhance the immune system. I do use a lot of turmeric and curcumin. That's a common thing in my practice. I believe that it's most important to get the diet right. That it's food first, and it's food 1 through 9. The supplements are what they're supplements. They are to, you know, supplement someone's health. They're not the main thing of what we're trying to do. Most of what I try to do is get people on a whole food, mostly plant-based diet. And then there's literature supporting the use of some of these other supplements to help. But I don't use a ton of.
Wait.
One of the things that I want to suggest to folks is to view cannabis as a nutraceutical, a nutrient, a supplement, if you will, to well-being. And particularly at low doses, it helps our bodies function more effectively, to more easily absorb the food that we eat. The endocannabinoid system, when it's stimulated by these plant compounds that the cannabis plant makes, it's been my experience that often what happens is it helps the body remember what health feels like and wants to go back to. That there's a certain kind of, pardon my woo-woo-ness after all this science, but it almost feels like there's a spirit in this plant that helps us remember what we're supposed to feel like, how it works, how it feels when our bodies work as they are intended to do so, how they have evolved.
And I think along those lines, you know, so many things about the world that we live in and the food that we eat and the stress that we're under, you know, those are the things that disrupt our endocannabinoid system. So many things about our modern life, you know, our ECS systems are not working properly. So, you know, by using cannabis, we're trying to restore balance. And again, my view is not, you know, one thing doesn't fix everything. You have to work on all of these things in a holistic model. You have to work on stress and sleep and eating a good diet and moving your body. I mean, it's all about all of these, not just one thing in isolation. And when you do that, you can get the body back in balance.
I have fibromyalgia and sleep issues. Where do I start?
So I would highly suggest finding I would suggest finding an integrative doctor, because I think an integrative medicine physician or a functional medicine physician is going to help get at the root cause of your problem and not just give you drugs, and work with you on a dietary approach. Exercise has been shown, you know, to help in fibromyalgia for sure. And then, you know, look at it in that way. And then if you're interested in looking at cannabis, work with a cannabis clinician that can help you choose products that might be beneficial to you. As I said, the studies, you know, have shown patients are reporting. Now, this isn't a randomized control trial. This is patient-reported data that 80% are having an improvement in pain and quality of life. And that's pretty impressive. And we know that the endocannabinoid system in fibromyalgia patients is not working properly. So those would be my suggestions, is to work with an integrative or functional physician, and then seek out a knowledgeable cannabis clinician if that's something you want to look into.
On the sleep side of it, one of our largest sellers is a product called Sleepy Time, made by ABX, and it's a high THC ratio. It's a tincture. There's also Mama Lou's CBD sleep tincture, which is actually 1,000 milligrams of CBD and 114 milligrams of THC in a tincture. But we've had people coming in and getting great relief for sleep with both of those products.
Wait.
Yes, we've seen some pretty good results with fibromyalgia per your report with topical use. I'm a big fan of small dosing internally with sublingual usage of formulations or tinctures, but also topical application at the site of pain. There seems to be some benefit there that's pretty dramatic. And with sleep is a really complicated thing. And I always ask people to have dialogue with themselves about what they think is the reason they're not able to sleep. If a person is full of energy and busting out all over and only needs 2 or 3 hours of sleep, it may not be necessary to change that. Whereas if it's someone's struggling with anxiety or fear of, there's all kinds of reasons to be afraid these days. But yeah, there's all kinds of reasons that people don't sleep. And depending on what those reasons are, you might find pain is a big one that holds people from being able to get comfortable enough to sleep. So all of those would ask for different methods of ingestion, different approaches to how to help you sleep through the night.
Thank you. How do I know the cannabis product I'm using is safe?
So every product that makes its way to the dispensary shelf is fully Cat 3 tested. Heavy metals, mold, mildew, residual solvents, pesticides. Some of the stuff that they're spraying on industrial hemp, like Stacey touched on, is causing more harm to the body than it's actually doing good. So it's really important when you do use a product that it is regulated and is tested, because then there's some quantitative data behind what you're using, and you can use the same product again. If you find something from your neighbor, you really don't know what's in it. So this, if you purchase from a dispensary, you're able to get the same product time and time again.
One of the few things that I think worked about legalization as it's happened here in California, there's a bunch of things that I think are not working well, but one of the things that is really good about it is the products that are available for sale in this dispensary here in Nevada County are literally some of the purest, cleanest, free of contamination products you can buy anywhere. If you took the same set of testing requirements that cannabis has to pass into a grocery store, there would be nothing in the grocery store you could buy. Literally nothing. It is one of the cleanest consumer products available in the world anywhere. And that's the California cannabis space right now. The testing requirements are they're parts per billion, which is, anyway, yeah, cleanest, safest product. It's one of the few beautiful things about legalization as it's happened.
And if even with growing it yourself, I would go check out the state of California website. They're finding that even pesticides that are organic pesticides, that even burn that's even causing issues. So even if you're growing it yourself and you're going to pick up an organic pesticide, you'll decide, go and check out the website, make sure that it is allowed, because things that I thought were fine, I'm finding out not fine. Issues with it. Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's okay.
Thanks, Chris. I play a lot of golf. I have non-injury back pain and shoulder pain. Where would I start if I wanted to use cannabinoids to alleviate some of the pain?
So it really depends on what the pain's caused from. If it's an inflammation issue, we would recommend someone use more of a high CBD product. My uncle was a professional, or he was a tennis player, and he was also a pharmacist. And the whole time he actually had to stop playing tennis because the arthritis in his knees was so bad. But we got him on the 30-to-1 CBD product, and he's actually playing tennis again. So someone with that issue, golf, tennis, same kind of thing, but a high CBD is what I would recommend.
Does that take a while, Daniel? Is it like immediate, or are you looking at months of?
So CBD takes a little bit of time to get built up in the body, especially
how much?
It depends on how deficient your body is. So depending on where you're at with your personal levels, but I say that CBD is more of like the oil in an engine, where THC is the gas that really fires it and psychoactivity. But CBD will be built up and it'll help over time.
Terrific, thanks.
And the topicals may be useful too.
Oh.
Topicals may help.
And that would that be a combination 1-to-1 or higher CBD, or does anybody have a thought on that?
Inflammation.
A lot depends on what is the cause of the pain. Pain is really a symptom of something wrong in the body, typically inflammation or other issues. And one of the things I love about cannabis medicine is it's really focused on treating the underlying causes of these various things as versus the symptoms of these conditions. That's all I have.
Okay. Next question, what is a spray? In quotation marks, spray.
So Sativex is a product that is made in other countries. It's not available here, and it's a sublingual spray. So one spray under the tongue is 2.7 milligrams of THC, 2.5 milligrams of CBD. So it's just a mechanism of getting it sublingual. But we don't have much of that.
A tincture would be the same effect as a spray. Yeah. So tinctures are just an oral way to ingest cannabis.
Okay, this is a long question. I'm trying to distill it, but I'll read it. So remedies are great, but also there are countries that cited in several major studies where many cancers are extremely low. Can't we put a greater emphasis on the factors such as diet so we don't have to contract these diseases in the first place? Makes sense. It seems most efforts are for finding a cure and very little on prevention. Any thoughts why that is?
Again, if you had to, if you went into a grocery store with the requirements for cannabis, there would be nothing in the store you could buy. And I think we, as a culture, are in effect being used as guinea pigs to test, like, is really glyphosate really not harmful? Because it's everywhere. And there's all kinds of toxins in our environment. I got an A in organic chemistry when I was college. I loved organic chemistry, but we have unleashed all kinds of compounds on this planet that never existed before we created them. And I think part of what's going on with this outbreak and the changes in our health status is some of these environmental toxins coupled with the things that Stacey was mentioning: stress, changes in diet, changes in the food chain, eating produce. If you've grown things in vegetables in your garden, you know that tomato that you just went and picked out of your garden, it's a really different kind of tomato than what you can buy at Safeway. No slam on Safeway, it's just part of the food system. But I really think that there's an awful lot going on, that in effect we are in the midst of an experiment that we're doing on ourselves about toxins and terrible things. The organic chemists, including Bayer and some of the French folks, were exchanging letters back in the 1800s about noticing that their lab assistants were getting all these weird cancers because of them being the ones who were actually mixing up these chemicals and making these new compounds. And the conversation amongst these leading thinkers of the time was that medicine will be able to cure these problems before it becomes a problem in the population.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. It's you know, giving chemotherapy for as long as I did, I mean, I know how expensive it is. And, you know, people are spending, and their insurance is paying for it, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every month for patients with, you know, advanced cancer. And, you know, there's very, very little going into the other end in terms of prevention. And, you know, part of it is there's, you know, who's going to fund the studies? You know, in terms of supplements and trying to test them in a scientific fashion, who's going to pay for that? You know, you can try to get grants, you can try to do small studies, but it's the pharmaceutical companies pay, you know, big money for these randomized clinical trials that then set the stage for what we do in oncology. So, you know, part of the reason I changed and went into integrative medicine was I was really just tired of that mill, and not that there's a place for it, and I believe in it, and I think it helps people, but there's also a place for taking a step back and looking at what we're eating and what we're drinking and moving our body and looking at this in a more holistic approach and getting it out not only to cancer patients but to people who may be at risk. I mean, we're all at risk, you know, but as I'm just sitting here drinking this, which I shouldn't drink, you know, this is full of BPA, or not full, but it has BPA in it, and BPA is a toxic estrogen. I don't need that, you know, I mean, I'm thirsty, so I'm going to drink it, but, you know, BPA is bad, and they've correlated the levels of BPA in with obesity in children and early onset of kids having their periods, girls having their periods early, because they're exposed to canned foods and plastics. That's pretty scary, you know, that that's all in our environment, and you have to be really, really conscious of it and aware.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Are suppositories helpful in preventing kidney liver toxicity? I assume these are cannabinoid suppositories.
So the rectal administration, the problem with it is that the absorption is really sketchy. And, you know, there's blood vessels in the rectum, and it's really just questionable whether it's even absorbed. Again, it needs to be more lipophilic, so like water loving as opposed to fat loving. It's better absorbed if it's more in a water type of thing, but that doesn't really happen, right? Most of the stuff is in a fatty solution. So I had a patient who was using Rick Simpson oil, which is high dose THC, extremely high doses in a rectal suppository, like, you know, like a gram a day, a lot. And I mean, walking around fine, not high at all. I'm like, it's not being absorbed. There's no way you're taking a gram of THC and it's not affecting you. So that's my thing with the rectal. I just don't see it absorbed.
Thanks. Is there a blood test that can determine the health of the endocannabinoid system?
Oh, I love that question. So, not available to us yet, and it's complicated because the endocannabinoid system is also on a circadian rhythm, right? And it's affected by sleep and other things. So it depends on the timing of when you draw the blood to take the test. They've looked at endocannabinoid levels in cerebrospinal fluid. So in like people with neurodegenerative diseases, they found abnormalities in their cerebrospinal fluid, and then we can test for it in the blood. But it's kind of like, it's hard to measure it because it's made on demand and it kind of comes and goes very rapidly. But it is interesting, and there are research labs that can test for endogenous cannabinoids. So I think we'll see more research going on, but right now there's really no clinical test that we can say, how is your endocannabinoid?
Wade?
I'm going to use a term that I love very much, and I consider myself a hill witch. And hill witches have learned that one of the things that if you have a condition, particularly one that does not seem to respond well to Western medicine, try a small dose, multiple small doses of some cannabis preparation. And if you educate yourself a little bit on the various things that are, there's all these various conditions that Dr. Ethan Russo refers to as cannabinoid deficiency syndromes. Cannabinoid deficiency syndromes are conditions that one of the ways you could define it is they respond favorably to cannabis. That's a great way to see how your endocannabinoid system's working from a hill witch.
Thanks, Wade. This might be one for Chris. As a cannabis brand, assume Golly, how do you feel about the potential of the medical and health and wellness market? Let me read this again. As a cannabis brand, how do you feel about the potential of the medical and health and wellness market?
How do I feel about it? I feel like there's not enough information out there yet. I feel like it needs to be spoken about a lot more and presented. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions out there about cannabis, especially when you go in, people going into the dispensaries and high THC, and a lot of people, it's a new thing. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the terpenes, about CBD, saying the hemp in the CBD and not having the THC. So it's going to take a bit of time to get the knowledge out there, but I'm excited about it and excited to be a brand that's going to support providing that knowledge. getting it out there. So there's a lot to be learned for the public.
Great, thank you.
I think that if you look at the studies that Stacey posted, everyone's talking about their quality of life and what cannabis does and how it improves that. So finding something that works for your exact condition, I think will help people get something identified for just them.
Yep, I agree. How can a veteran get help from the VA with cannabinoid therapy?
Well, a few years ago, there was a bill that passed that allowed veterans to have a medical recommendation for if they lived in a state where there was a medical program, for example, California, Colorado. There's a bill that has been introduced that will allow doctors with a VA to recommend, medical cannabis. Now, this is kind of a controversial issue because, again, cannabis is a Schedule I drug, and so the VA is funded and controlled by the federal government. So there's a lot, even though the bill passed a few years ago, there's a lot of controversy about how can, a VA doctor, for example, recommend, medical cannabis when it's still a Schedule I drug. So I think that this is something to watch. If you are a voter, definitely get out there and educate yourself on the matter. And then, this is how we change the laws, advocacy, and a lot of this information that was given here today will hopefully empower a lot of you to go out there and talk to your elected officials about, the medical cannabis and how we can create greater access.
Thanks, Maria. What does the future of medical cannabis look like for medical cannabis? Let's see, let's try this again. What does the future of medical cannabis look like for Nevada County?
Oh, we are starting right now. Nevada City was the first municipality in Nevada County to promote an ordinance that allowed for any sort of a regulated industry. Now Nevada County does allow for cultivation, which is a really big step for our farmers to be able to walk down. We've been a county of cultivators for a long time who have cultivated some of the best medical cannabis in California, and now we're able to actually bring it to the legal market. So with companies like Higher Commitment, Floracy, we're actually bringing products to the regulated market here in Nevada County. So I think it's a great start, and it's the beginning.
Yeah, I think that Nevada City, Nevada County has a lot of potential. It's got the witches, it's got the organic gardeners, it's got some of the best climate, I think, in the world for growing cannabis. It's been in the 3,500 farms in this county, and it's been something that's embedded here. So there's a lot of knowledge. And then a lot of different aspects that, one of my goals is to create a facility where there's all these different people that could come together and share this knowledge from these different areas, collaborate and make it happen.
I'd like to add to that. An important point in my mind to make is that what do we mean when we talk about medical cannabis? And from my point of view, and I strongly suggest this is a kind of a good way to see it, all cannabis has the potential to be medical. It could provide benefit to the end user if it's free of contaminants, if it's clean, just cannabis. And the beautiful thing about Nevada County and the potential for it being a center of medical cannabis is, as Chris said, we have the organic gardeners. Some would say the modern organic movement started in this county. Some of the original old school people in organic agriculture are here. We have a long tradition of working with cannabis, but we also have a long tradition of alternative healing therapies, different approaches to wellness. We have the School of Ayurvedic Medicine right here in Nevada City, the only one accredited in all of North America, right here in our little town. And I would suggest that we have, again, because of our environment, because of some of the farmers and the genetics and the awareness of this plant that we have here, we actually have an opportunity to literally create a world-renowned destination for wellness associated with not just cannabis, but wellness. Our farm to table movement here in Nevada County is growing stronger by the day. And again, food is an essential part of our well-being. And to me, the upside is huge. And what's really important to me in a marketing point of view is nobody else in California is talking about this. Nobody else is going in the direction of what we do here is the cleanest, purest, highest version of this plant and what it can do for you.
Thanks, Lee. How is the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance involved locally to support medical cannabis? Let me read it again. How is the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance included locally to support medical cannabis?
So the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance is an organization that advocates for regulation and future laws for the industry. I'm a board member there. Diana Gamzon's our executive director. Wade's also a board member. And we really try to promote the plant, show the future of what it can do in a regulated market. I think that they have done we do a great job of showing what it can be and not what it was.
It's helped me a huge amount with being able to get my farm up and going. It's not an easy path. Getting this, it's super regulated, the most regulated industry I think there is. So it's provided me guidance, support, voice, all the way around. So that's why I think one of the main reasons we're here growing today.
I would also add that the one of the things that the Cannabis Alliance does that probably doesn't get as much attention as what goes on in supporting our business folks who have applied for licenses and gotten them and actually are trying to create a business in this work. We also represent the needs of patients, the people who actually need the materials that these farmers produce. Most of the folks in California that want to smoke a joint can smoke a joint. You don't have to go to a dispensary to get your tested product. But if you want a formulation that is specific and that has CBD and THC and you want to know it's free of contaminants and you want to know what dosage it is and all of that, you really need to go to the dispensary. You can grow your own. You can grow your own, and you can do really good medicine with growing your own and making your own oils and that kind of thing. But if you're not wanting to go in that direction, there's really great products available in the dispensaries here.
Okay. No more questions? I have a question. So terrific information tonight, medical cannabis. A lot of people in this audience, myself would be included if I wasn't knee deep or maybe neck deep in it right now. Where do they go? What's next? If I'm somebody out there that's saying, I have an ailment, I don't know if medical cannabis will help me. I'm reticent to show up at a dispensary. First, I might be embarrassed to go in. I don't know who might see me. It still has a connotation or a stigma of it's cannabis. What do I do?
Well, we've seen over 30,000 people since we've opened our doors. So, we have helped a lot of people. And you'd be surprised who you see in there. Anyone from my high school teachers to, doctors in the area. So I wouldn't be too worried about coming in there. You're always greeted with friendly smiles. All of our products are available at elevation2477.com, and we do deliver. So if you're scared of coming in, we can deliver to your home. It's not that scary in there. We're nice. We don't bite.
I think, again, looking at the cannabisclinicians.org site, you can find cannabis clinicians that have experience and that can help you if your own physician is uncomfortable. And from my perspective, I think that the doctors out there and the nurses, there's a huge need for education. And so that's one of the things, that I would like to continue to do is try to educate our nurses and clinicians in terms of just even the basics and getting their minds open and at least, listen to possible benefits. So I think that, as that education happens, more and more clinicians are going to be open to this. And because it is difficult, I think, for some patients to find a doctor that can really help them. So I think it's a problem.
Yeah, I would agree with what Dr. DeAndre just said. If your physician is not comfortable talking with you about what you're proposing, if you decide that you want to self-medicate, really important message that she was giving was start with small doses, go slow. Don't think that just one version or one way of ingesting cannabis is the answer for you. If you try something and it's not working, don't give up at that point. And again, cannabis can help your body find health, but health is really made up of so many different components: rest, stress reduction, eating good food. Take care of yourself. That's really the message up here. Cannabis can help with that. But it's really all about all these various components of what make up our lives. The relationships that you have with the people that you love or know or work with, the food that you consume, what you do with your time, what you pay attention to in your day. All of those things have effects, just like cannabis has effects. Cannabis is not the answer, the be-all, end-all. It's not a silver bullet. It can help with these situations. And that's all I got.
You could try growing your own plant. Go pick out some seeds and tend to it and see what happens. Give it a little try.
Thank you. I have one closing comment, perhaps, and it takes off on what Wade mentioned about wellness. There are tens of thousands of people just like me in the country that are looking for an adjunct to their standard therapy, whether they have cancer or some of the other conditions that Dr. DeAndre identified. And I think our county has the opportunity at this point to decide, do we really want to be a world-class destination for wellness? And I think the panel touched on all the, the threads that we could weave a fabric out of if we choose to. So I guess my closing comment is the challenge I would offer to our elected officials, our hospital executives, people, our community members, to decide whether this is something that we could be known for. We were known for the richest gold mines in the world at one time. And so, not to try and compare this to green gold, but in terms of the wellness aspects, it seems like there are a lot of pieces here, but I personally don't see any leadership yet that's taken that directive to try and move us that way. So my hope in convening this is that enough information might be shared so that there would be that spark, or somebody would say, hey, maybe we can form a different form of an alliance that could lead us to becoming not just a destination, but the destination for people that, and I mean, it's tens of thousands of people with cancer who are really struggling with all the things that Dr. DeAndre pointed out, and they don't know where to go. And I was one of them until I got involved, and that was happenstance, just because we own a cocktail lounge and people were in it, and they said, try this. And so I was a self-medicator, not knowing what I was doing, and then finally running into a healthcare professional like Dr. DeAndre gave me some guidance. And that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for evidence-based guidance, and I think we have an opportunity. And the question is, will we seize it? So,
I'd like to thank a couple of our elected officials who are here. Because of you guys, that we have an ordinance and we have a policy in place. So I saw Sue Hook was attending tonight. Heidi Hall also is here, and David Sparky Parker. Thank you so much for you guys. If it wasn't for you creating laws, we wouldn't be able to do this.
Okay, well, that concludes the presentation. So thank you, panel. Thank you for all our volunteers. Thank you for our sponsors. Most of all, thank you for the audience who hung around and some great questions. Thank you for our virtual audience for sticking with us. And if I can twist Dr. DeAndre's arm, maybe we can get her back here in 6 months and she can give us an update. We'll do. We won't have introduction. We'll have like 102 instead of 101. So thank you very much and have a good evening.